Hey everyone, so this video is about Macbeth by William Shakespeare. I'm going to be looking at the context and themes. We'll look at a bit of background on the writer and what the play is about, as well as a few themes that I think are pretty important. Not all of the themes, but these are just some of them. So let's go. So about the writer, William Shakespeare. These are some basic facts that you should know. Shakespeare was born in Stratford-upon-Avon in 1564 on the 23rd of April, which happens to be St. George's Day. He died on his birthday in 1616. He was a playwright, poet and actor, wrote approximately 38 plays, 154 sonnets and 2 long narrative poems that we know of. Context. So the majority of his plays were set in foreign countries, but Macbeth was set in Scotland. So it was written as a coronation gift for King James I. He is the monarch that took over after Queen Elizabeth I, because she didn't marry and didn't have any direct heirs, and James was her cousin. Also a Protestant, which is why he was given the throne. So King James was an extremely superstitious man who also believed in the divine right to rule. So what is the divine right to rule? It's the belief that the king is pre-selected prior to birth and is chosen by God himself. Therefore, anyone who tries to take over as king is a usurper and is going against God himself. Banquo was supposedly based on a real-life ancestor of King James, which is why the witch's prophecy is so important. It complements the king by legitimizing his rule of England at the moment, as well as his rule of Scotland. So one of the things the witches say to Banquo is lesser than Macbeth and greater. And they also say, thou shalt get kings, though thou be none. Again, going back to him being the ancestor of James, and therefore legitimizing his rule as king. Jacobean audiences were religious and had to go to church or face a large fine. As a result of being so religious, they were extremely fearful and hated anything to do with witches. So obviously anyone related to the witches within the play was not going to be seen in a positive light. Meaning of the play. So Macbeth is a play about the fall of a good man and his belated realization of his corruption. He does to an extent understand that the things he's doing is incorrect and wrong, but he is still tempted by the idea of power and being king. In Shakespeare's scheme of events, the well-being of a country is at the mercy of the well-being of the ruler. So if the ruler is a good man, the country will do well. If the ruler is an evil man, then the country will suffer, which is why Macbeth is quite often referred to as tyrant. It was similar to the morality plays of the time, but Shakespeare's construction of his hero gives a new dimension to the struggle between good and evil. A morality play is a genre of play during the medieval and early Tudor times, in which the protagonist is met by different moral attributes who try to prompt him to choose a good life over one of evil. Obviously it was a religious time, so this is the sort of plays that people were used to, but Shakespeare decided to do a slight twist on his. The murder of Duncan is not simply an act of political rebellion, but a violation of the laws of hospitality, kinship and human decency, as he was killed in Macbeth's home as his guest. During the Tudor period, they had rules in which if somebody was a guest in your home, it was your duty to protect them and give them anything they could whilst under your roof, within reason. In Act 1, Scene 1, he even says, as his host, who should against his murderer shut the door. So Macbeth understands that everything he's doing goes against the laws of hospitality. Even a good man is pathetically vulnerable to the seductive and destructive possibilities of power. He's shown as a very good, decent, upright man at the beginning, who is then tempted by the idea of power because of the evilness of the witches. Themes. Women in the play. So other than Hecate, none of the women in the play are given names. They are all referred to by their husband's name or something impersonal, such as Lady Macbeth, Lady Macduff, Witch 1 and Witch 2. This is a way of showing the lack of importance they have as women in society. So women were not highly regarded during the Jacobean era. They were expected to be quiet, obedient and subservient to their husbands. This was also something that the church taught as well. However, there are exceptions to this in the play, conveniently followed by the women being punished in some way due to this perceived misbehavior. As Lady Macbeth is not docile and pushes her husband to commit the acts needed to become king. She becomes mad and kills herself. Lady Macduff speaks negatively about her husband to her son when she thinks he was a traitor and had left them behind, when she said, "Why, I can buy me 20 at any market," as in saying she can buy a husband anytime that she wants. She is, coincidentally, murdered along with her son soon after these comments. By having something bad happen to the women who don't fit in with society's expectations and rules, Shakespeare is trying to say that you need to stay in your lane. Ambition. So one of the main themes of the play is ambition. After hearing the prophecy from the witches, Macbeth sets out to make it all a reality. This is what's called a self-fulfilling prophecy. And a self-fulfilling prophecy is a prediction that becomes true due to belief and behavior. So if he just discounted everything the witches said and hadn't taken any actions, such as writing the letter to his wife, killing Duncan, and killing Banquo, and killing Seward, and killing everyone basically, then perhaps nothing would have happened. However, because he did take these actions, he made it a self-fulfilling prophecy. Every action Macbeth and Lady Macbeth take leads to their ultimate goal and demise. So all hail Macbeth that shalt be king hereafter. That is the quote and the prophecy that started everything that was the beginning of their downfall. Shakespeare wanted to use the play as a message to others that if they tried to want something that wasn't theirs, then there would be consequences. Again, this is to flatter the king who a lot of people didn't think should be king because he was only a cousin of Elizabeth's, and there was relatives that were quite closer to her, however they were Catholic. So Macbeth's ambition also leads him to kill a lot of other people and consort with the witches in order to keep the crown he initially stole. The supernatural. So the opening of the play starts with the three witches and no other characters. The fact that the witches are discussing Macbeth is a foreshadowing that his fate is intertwined with them and therefore will not be positive. Where the place? Upon the heath, there to meet with Macbeth. Remember, the Jacobean audience would have been extremely religious and extremely superstitious, so starting the play with the witches would have already terrified some of the audience and would not have made them think positively of Macbeth because he has been mentioned by these evil creatures. Jacobean audiences would have feared the witches as being real beings and would have been spooked by the opening scene. Whenever the witches appear, there is thunder in the stage directions to highlight their evilness and connection with darkness, as thunder only comes with storms. The witches also only ever speak in rhyme to mimic a spell is being cast every time they are seen. Banquo's ghost is another example of the supernatural and incites fear in the audience. Again, they would have believed that the ghost was real. Our graves must send those that we bury back. Order versus chaos. So Act 1, Scene 4. Duncan distributes justice and rewards. There is a great emphasis on ties that bind a subject to his king. This is an example of order. Banquets are an image of order as well, as they are an event that has rules and expectations. People have to behave in a certain way. An intimation of chaos comes in the form of the murderer with blood on his face. His face is not clean. This goes against order. Throughout the play, images of disorder and sickness are presented, from the hurly-burly of the first scene through to the revolt of the final battle. Macbeth's personal condition is reflected in the disorder in nature on the night of Duncan's murder. Sleep no more, Macbeth does murder sleep. Light and grace versus darkness. Grace is used in its Christian sense of the helping power of God. Remember, the king is chosen by God. The moral confusion suggested by the witches' fair is foul at the beginning of the play shows the irreconcilable differences of good and evil that the play will explore. Remember, people during that era were told what is good and what is evil. This play explores how things can be overlapped. So there are contrasts between Duncan and Macbeth as light and darkness. Duncan, signs of nobleness like stars shall shine on all deservers. Whereas Macbeth, stars, hide your fires, let no light see my black and deep desires. The eye wink at the hand, yet let that be which the eye fears when it is done to see. The stars are the eyes of heaven. Duncan wants them to shine on those who do good, while Macbeth wants to hide his evil deeds from them. Contrary images of darkness and evil are particularly obvious in the witches, who are considered instruments of darkness. And Macbeth's self-identification with evil seems complete in Act 4, Scene 1. He conjures the witches to answer his inquiries. Secret black midnight hags. This scene in which Macbeth actually tells the witches to come to him is his final fall into darkness, where he is now voluntarily having an interaction with the witches. Remember in Act 1, Scene 3, when he first came across the witches, it was by accident. But now in Act 4, Scene 1, he's the one who is instigating the meet. The final scene of the play, Macbeth is described as a devil, a hellhound, and a follower of Satan and a rarer monster. Macbeth kills young Siward, who was called a soldier of God, and who sees the war against Macbeth as a holy war against evil. So, that was a lot of information, and I hope this video was useful. Again, follow me on social media, which is Hana.iam on Instagram, and I am Hana.iam on Twitter. Share, like, and subscribe, and if there's any questions, do leave a comment. I answer all questions to do with the videos and with work, and I'll see you next time.